What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to episode 130 of the Rise to Glory here with Gibraltar Apex. And today I have for you guys Season 18's end of season review. Today we're going to take a look over the season, look at the highs, the lows, the squad performance. We of course have one last game to do today. And actually, before we start going into the nitty gritty detail, we are going to take today's game and savour it, because today, at the end of Season 18, we have to say goodbye to two players who will sadly be retiring from professional football. And I believe, in all my saves on YouTube, these might be the first two players who are regens who I sign to retire completely from football, which is a real shame. I'm still secretly hoping they will stay on as staff, and hopefully we can re-sign them to keep them at the club, I guess for as long as possible. But we do have to say goodbye to Jack Peachman and Ben Connolly. Both of them will be leaving. However, we will be playing both of them in the Rock Cup final today against Lincoln Gibraltar, and I'm hoping that they can give a performance to be proud of. Jack Peachman here, of course, 76 goals in 97 league appearances for the club. An instrumental player very early on in this save, became a hero. He was a quality player for us, and during the early days of European campaigns, he was a leading light in the team. And of course, alongside him, we have Ben Connolly, who will also be unfortunately retiring after today's game. Both of these players will be playing in the squad, so I'm hoping that they can, give performances to be proud of. But yeah, I mean, fantastic for both of these players to have, played the majority of their career in the case of Ben Connolly, and the entire career in the case of Peachman at the club. Unfortunately, retiring rather young at 33, but given the fact, they're not playing football for us, and you can't really blame me for not playing them, but just given the fact they're not playing football, they want to hang up their boots now rather than drag it on too long. I asked Peachman to reconsider retirement, and he politely declined. Unfortunately, that does mean that for today, we will be saying goodbye to them, but they're going to play as part of a three-man strike force alongside Moscow, which should be some good fun. And hopefully each of them can get a goal to round off their careers at the club. Anyway, of course, we played the Champions League semi-final last episode. Since then, just a few little results. We beat Manchester 62 6-0. We then beat Lincoln Red Imps. In fact, no, we didn't. We've got Lincoln Red Imps today. We actually beat their kind of B team who play in the second division 8-0. And I've not talked a lot about their B team. But like, the B teams in Spain, for example, they can't be promoted. But in recent years, they've been like this weird dominant force just in the second division. You can see they finished comfortably top this year. And that is the 5th time in 6 years that they finished at the top. You can see as a result of both Red Imps and Europa Pegasus, who are B teams, finishing so highly, Leo actually got the automatic promotion spot, and Gibraltar Phoenix winning the playoffs. So they will be coming up into the Primera Division. Of course, the Primera Division, now the big money division. If we just look through the teams here, now you'll notice that we are professional. I don't believe many other teams have gone professional this year. Of course, College Europa are a team who were pro. And actually, something that I forgot to mention, and I said I forgot to mention, I just didn't notice it. College Europa got to the Europa League group stage this year. They did it under the radar. I don't think I mentioned it in a live com. Either I forgot about it completely or just didn't notice. They lost every single game, but they got there. And they went straight into the Europa League group stage, and they did okay for themselves. So, I mean, fair play to them to get that far. Of course, they played in Group J. If we just have a quick look at the group stage and all the groups, you can also see, of course, that Gibraltar Lions, we already knew this, but they were in the group stage as well. They finished 3rd in their group. But College Europa to finish rock bottom 4th, perhaps not great for them. But at the same time, to have 3 Gibraltarian teams reaching not knockout stages, but group stages of European kind of competitions is absolutely fantastic, and hopefully that can kind of continue to occur. But yeah, if we just flick through the rest of the Gibraltarian teams, you should notice kind of a common trend emerging, and that is the fact their finances are reasonably good. It says they're secure, obviously. They've got a lot of money in the bank. I actually have a skin, which I'm gonna load up this skin. But if we quickly go here, and I want to say it's the Wanna Chup Brew skin. This skin has some custom panels, and I've used it in the past just to check things. But it allows you to see what other teams' finances are. Now, I don't usually use this skin, and in some ways I can understand how someone would think that seeing the wage budget and transfer budget of other teams in your saves is cheating, which is one reason why I just don't use this skin normally. But I do think it's kind of interesting for us just to have a look here at teams like Bruno's Magpies, who you can see here. They have a kind of balance of £71 million. Their transfer budget is £18 million, and their wage budget sits at £287,000. Now, of course, the thing to note is, and I talked about this when we first had the TV deal at the start of this, these teams, they're so low rep, and the AI is not that great when you suddenly get a load of them and you're a low rep side. that they probably won't actually spend that much of this money they have. But I mean, you can see in the case of Lynx, they've only got £200,000 available for spending. But because these teams aren't, spending all their money on transfers just yet, they're going to start to rack up a balance. So really, each team will have around £74 million in money from TV revenue this year. Of course, in the case of ourselves and Gibraltar Lions, it will be slightly different. You can see Gibraltar Lions actually over their wage budget, but their transfer budget this year, they've spent like £7 million, which is pretty crazy for them. If you look at ourselves, that's something I don't like about this skin is the crazy background stuff going on. But you can see here we obviously have a balance of 82 million. That's because of our success in Europe. But then you can see kind of our wage budget and current wage budget. But I mean, this is really good to see. I don't believe there's a TV deal in the Segunda division. And that's going to make things a little bit weird, I guess, when it comes to, you hear about in English football, the difference between the Championship and the Premier League kind of finances just being too big and teams struggling to overcome that. You look at teams like Gibraltar Phoenix, who won the playoffs this year, their club balance is £35,000. Like, they are suddenly going to have £72 million, which is going to be absolutely crazy for them. Of course, they're not going to sign a load of players in the first year, as I mentioned, because they're so low rep, they just can't attract that many players. But as the league rep continues to increase, and they kind of have the Manchester City effect about them, some of these teams, we really should see them start to get some real pulling power. And, well, for some of these teams, they're going to have fairly big budgets next year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of players they perhaps bring in. And of course, with them all being so rich, you'll notice that a lot of their professional statuses are now going to be professional. In fact, actually, they're all professional. I didn't even realise that. Of course, it's worth noting that in Gibraltar, we've had this before, but the season ends before the Rock Cup final, which is always a little bit weird. But as a result, it means that they've all gone pro at the end of the year, which actually, I could check it now. We can have a look at the landmarks of the teams, but I can pretty much guarantee you that it's been in the last week. It's a little bit weird, because obviously, if you manage in England, stuff like the FA Cup happens, and then the team of the season, etc., is announced afterwards. Whereas in this kind of country, for whatever reason, it's just different. So if we go on Manchester 62, I saw that they went professional, and look at landmarks. You can see they actually turned professional at the end of... Oh, no, actually, it was the day before today, so it was at the end of May on the 29th. And actually, I imagine if we flick through all the teams, you can see here that the kind of quote-unquote end date for Gibraltar's season is clearly seen as the 29th of May for some reason. But yeah, it's cool to see so many teams going pro, and in fact it looks like the majority of the teams in the top flight who weren't already pro have now gotten pro. So that'll be interesting to see if, with that new status, if they can attract any players. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to ramble too much before we got into the live comp today. Let's get into it. It should be a fun game. We're going to play a 4-3-3, which is going to be completely unbalanced as a formation, but I want to get Ben Connolly and Peachman some goals today if we can. We're taking on Reading, who by no means are the worst team in the nation. But at the same time, we should be beating them kind of quite easily, even with kind of two players really being carried by the side. But anyway, this is a bit of a testimonial, I guess you could say, because these players never actually had testimonials. I've had a weird issue, and I don't know if it's exclusive to my save, or maybe I'm just doing things wrong, but I don't seem to be able to select friendlies to be testimonials for my players. As I said, it's probably me doing something wrong. I've looked into it a little bit, and I couldn't seem to work out the solution. Either way, number 31 and number 30, the two players, I want them both to try and get one goal. Mosca to Cabasele, whips in the ball. Peachman, he's looking for it. He wants the goal today. He's not played a game in 10 years or so. Oh, okay, well, he has scored. Welcome back. It took 50 seconds, Jack Peachman. Maybe don't retire. You've cut off all your long hair. I'm not sure about that, son. I'm kind of really hoping that these two players, particularly Ben Connolly and Peachman, two players who I'm sure you guys remember, in their prime, early on in this save, they were the two strikers who really were a driving force of this team for a few years. I'm desperately hoping we can keep both of them on as staff roles at the team. It would be really cool if we could have one being the assistant manager and one being kind of, the head coach or something like that. Really, I don't know, what's the word? Like graduate players almost. When they decide to retire, we kind of graduate them into the coaching team, and that's a long-term kind of project, I guess, to kind of end up with a backroom staff that's just full of former players. Whether or not that is possible, I'm not entirely sure. Of course, there's no guarantee these guys will want to stay in football. I really hope they will. As Mosca hits the crossbar, that would have been an insane goal. Ben Connolly still with the rebound, maybe. Can he get the ball in? He can't, unfortunately. But yeah, things going well so far. I feel a bit strange having shown you guys all the transfer budgets and stuff with that alternative skin. As I said, don't really use it normally. It's a weird part of that skin. I always find it interesting seeing what different panels Football Manager skins have. And, well, the one, a Chutbury one, has that one that shows club finances that anyone can see. And whilst it's a little bit weird because you don't normally see it, I feel like for the sake of showing you guys the TV deal effect, it's kind of worthwhile just so you can get an idea of just how the money's being spread, the fact teams are all going professional. And, well, hopefully, you know, the league rep continues to rise, the money continues to slowly creep up with TV money. And, well, even if for the next 5 years none of these teams spend any of the £70 million they get in 5 years or so, everyone's going to have £350 million. And eventually it's got to be spent on something, be it a new stadium, you know, state-of-the-art facilities. It'd be really cool to get to a situation, I guess, where every club in Gibraltar has their own kind of stadium and everyone has the best facilities. And that would definitely have a long-term benefit, I think, on Gibraltarian football, despite the country's small population, which is always going to hold it back when it comes to how good the national team can be. It would still be a kind of massive achievement. And so interesting to see how it would play out in FM. You know, as much as this save's been going now for 18 years, as far as I'm concerned, there could be another 18 years of this save, and I'd probably still find it enjoyable because I think there's different stuff starting to happen now. For example, the World Cup qualifiers have just started for the Gibraltar national team, and I did kind of weigh up, I mentioned it years ago now. I mentioned the idea that maybe I would add a manager to the Gibraltar national team post as the manager, then retire him and then hope that I could apply for the job and get it, because with these smaller nations, the managers don't move on so quickly. And a lot of people were like, yeah, do the Gibraltar job, and I kind of decided not to at the time. There was a real temptation to do it this year because the national team is starting to improve, and it kind of correlated with the new World Cup qualifying that I was just talking about. But I believe they've won their first 2 games. I think it's against, I want to say, Liechtenstein and Ukraine. I think they won both of them. And actually, the national team's into the top 70 in the world as far as the FIFA rankings are concerned, which, I mean, top 70 doesn't sound that impressive, but when you consider that for the longest period of time, really, it's been a nation that struggled to break kind of the top 150, suddenly to have players taking up the nationality is really nice. Either way, it doesn't look like Ben Connolly is going to get his goal, which is a real shame. Let's try putting him as the advance forward and Peachman alongside him. I feel like this is a cup final I should definitely take more seriously. Unfortunately, it's just not going to be the case as Lamas decides he wants to get in on the action and gets a goal himself, hammers it into the roof of the net. Moscow with the shorter free kick here, a bit of an unusual one. You don't see many of them in FM, and Lamas, one touch, bang. Pick that out. Nice little finish there. Makes it 3-0. And that is going to secure the result in case it was in doubt. I don't think it really was. You look at the stats, Redim's yet to have a shot on goal. It's been a pretty decent performance. Unfortunately, as I said, Connolly not going to get that goal, but Peachman ending on a high. Hopefully we can keep them on that. It's a 3-0 win at the Space Park in the Rock Cup final. Kind of curious to know what the Rock Cup final prize money is going to be. It's worth noting, I talked about Moscow trying to take over Tuzon's goal-scoring record of 74 goals in the season. He actually got a damaged foot right at the end of the year. In fact, it happened in the CSKA Moscow game. This is the first game he's had back, and as a result, wasn't able to get up to that 74 goal mark. Anyway, we celebrate a famous quadruple. I mean, we've had a few of them in our time. We get £7.5 million in prize money, which is a nice little amount. Tuzon praises the Space's spirits. Thank you very much, Tuzon. 33 years old now, playing for Nantes in France, but you can see 14 goals in 20 games for Gibraltar is a really decent return at international level. Moscow plays well. Squad payout, £500,000 to be paid out to the squad. Moscow did well. Lincoln Redim's overachievers finishing in, of course, runner-up spot, and Paul Smith with 5 assists. A nice little total for him. So that was Ben Connolly and Jack Peachman's last ever games for the club. I feel sad now. At this point, I feel like I should have a montage with really sad music showing some of their best moments together. I kind of find it nice that a strike pairing that we had for such a long period of time, they've kind of decided to call it quits at the same time. I like to believe they're going to start their own business together or something. But yeah, no, we have to salute these guys. They're definitely not the players they once were. Well, maybe they are the players they once were, but just not relative to the team. There was a point where these two guys really were the leading men in our side. Unfortunately, those days have kind of long gone. Anyway, let's get into some nitty-gritty stuff about this season. You may have just noticed a jump cut. I recorded this end-of-season thing, and it just wasn't very good, so I'm redoing it. Hopefully, with a slightly clearer mind. So, of course, this year was a good year for us. A little bit of a mixed bag, you could say, in some regards, of course. To get to the Champions League semi-finals was a massive achievement. The manner in which we ran out has kind of provoked thought for me, certainly. It's given me I don't want to say a fresh perspective, but it makes me really realise and kind of appreciate that over the last few years, the squad's just got a little bit too small. And that's kind of, it's a natural progression with us growing and with the budgets that we had kind of enforced on us. But with the next season coming up, really, I think we could be adding, 4 or 5 really backup players to the team in the centre mid department. I'd love to really revamp the striker department. Because, of course, with Peachman and Connolly retiring, you actually look at our striking options. I don't want to say they're limited, but, I mean, it's not looking great for us. We have Mora, Paul Smith, Jose, and Mosca. And realistically, Jose joined us as that backup. He's complaining about lack of first-team football. I think we're going to try and cash in on him while we can. Whether or not I can make back the £3.7 million, I'm not entirely sure. But I think realistically, we're looking at least 2 more strikers. I have done a little bit of business already, and I didn't talk about it just because, to be honest, it's only just come to my mind, the fact that I haven't talked about it. I'll preview one of the players, and that player is Sebastian Girard. Now, this is a guy to look forward to next year. 19 years old, 4 goals in 4 under-21 appearances. Plays for Belgium. You can see a very technically gifted striker. His finishing, composure and off the ball could all do with a little bit of work, but this guy is 19. And if we look at how he's done it in Belgium for Standard Liège, you can see he got 24 goals in 32 games, which is an absolutely insane return. You can see that his deal is a £14.5 million deal with £12.5 million up front. So he's one of the players I'm definitely looking to kind of bring in to help with our striker woes, because I definitely feel like in that CSKA semi-final, we really kind of felt the effects of the fact that we are relying quite heavily on Mosca. And as good as Mosca is, and he's absolutely insane, and he has developed a lot this year, the Brazilian, you kind of look at his coach report, the fact that he has injury concerns is problematic, particularly when you're trying to lean on a player like this. So I'm looking to bring in a few more players like Mosca to really take out into that next level. I think Girard can be that guy. He looks very good. I've scouted him obviously thoroughly. I can't see this guy being a bad transfer. He's interested to join us. He's been in a rich vein of form. Could be a Premier Division striker in the future. Really good personality. He's very rapid as well. And I really can see this guy making a good strike partner for Mosca next year. And with his kind of relatively young age, plenty of time to develop. A 24-goal-a-season striker for Standard Liège, age 19, is a really exciting prospect. And I'm really happy that we've got our hands on him. Anyway, elsewhere, I feel like defensively we're actually fairly solid right now. I think we need a third goalkeeper. Of course, Young got injured and we had Salcido kind of come into the team for the Champions League semi-finals. I feel like another goalkeeper's probably needed. We, of course, had Romero for a while, the Gibraltarian. Unfortunately, he moved on last year. And it is an area of the pitch which we are a little bit perhaps weaker in than perhaps I'd like to admit. Defensively, though, I feel like this is perhaps where our team is at its best. We've brought in some great players over the last few years, players like Cabasele, the Belgian. We've also got players like Gaiganov, who, of course, joined us this year. And these players are top players. And I'm really excited to hopefully build a team going forward that kind of focuses more on the attack, because defensively, I think at this point we are very, very sorted. Mustafa's 24, Cabasele's 22, Gaiganov's 24. We've, of course, got Frigier, Palermo, McMaster's only 26. He's been an okay player, McMaster. I think for £15 million, I perhaps wanted a little bit more out of him. In hindsight, maybe not the craziest bit of business, but you know what? He's 26. He played well for us in Europe. And he has been a reasonable player for us. But I definitely think of our back four, he's the weak link. But that seems like an absolutely ludicrous thing to say, kind of when you consider the fact that, well, we have the players like Cabasele, Gaiganov, and, well, Mustafa. To call McMaster a weak link seems a little bit harsh. In terms of the midfield, there's a few players complaining about lack of first-team football. I feel like we could have a little bit more strength out on the right wing. We've, of course, had Daniel Forster and Pereira over the last few years who have played that position for us. And as good as these guys are, I do kind of feel like it's a position that we could certainly upgrade in. Really, since Christian Mendes left for Arsenal a few years ago now, it's just been a position that we perhaps needed to sort a little bit more. It's worth noting, actually, with Christian Mendes, I have looked to potentially sign him. However, Arsenal, despite having him transfer listed, wants a really hefty sum of money, and he wants a high squad role, which I wouldn't be too comfortable giving him returning to the squad. So that's a little bit of a shame. I think also the centre-mid kind of department could do a little bit of work. If we look at our kind of strength in position by centre mid, whilst we do have players like Gilvan, Mora, Bouchard, Graphite, JJ and Lamas, I think Lamas might be a player we move on if we can. He joined us a few years ago now, but he might be a player to move the 24-year-old Spaniard. But elsewhere in the team, I feel like we could do with maybe one more really good defensive midfielder or maybe one more box-to-box, particularly with kind of the nature of our team's systems as of late, of course. You guys know we've been kind of switching between a few different systems, and to be fair, the number of centre mids we have when we want to play the 4-4-2 isn't that bad because we only have 2 centre mids. But with this kind of new evolution that the squad's going through, where we are playing some formations with 3 centre mids, including the 1 centre attacking mid, and even with this formation, the 4-3-1-2, where we're playing with 4 centre mids, I do feel like we're lacking perhaps 1 or 2 more players just to give us that kind of full degree of flexibility in that position on the park. Anyway, in terms of actual team and kind of player performances this year, we are going to switch to the post-mortem squad review and take a look at how things have gone here. So in terms of goals, Mosca got 70. That is a crazy return. I did not think we'd see a total as high as Twos on 74 goals. Mosca was on course to smash that record until he got injured at the end of the year, which was a real shame. You can see actually this year he's had a few injuries really in the last few months. Sprained wrist, thigh strain, damaged foot. I'm hoping that's not a sign of things to come. Of course, we know that he's injury prone. It was something that was really flagged and brought to our attention when we first signed him. And you can see he's had a few times when he's been out for a fairly lengthy period of time. Never more than kind of a few months. But the few weak injuries do stack up. But that said, this guy's 22. He's an absolutely insane player. Look at him, composure, off the ball finishing, reasonable heading. He's okay in the air. He's rapid, he makes space for himself. His anticipation makes him just a great little fox in the box. And I think 70 goals for him is not what we will come to expect in the next few years, but I definitely expect him to be kind of our main striker, and I'm kind of excited to see how he gets on alongside Sebastian Girard. Other goal scorers, Paul Smith, 29 years old now, the Australian. 29 goals in 33 games and 8 appearances off the bench. Good return for him. Gilvan, a little bit of a surprise package when it's come to the goals, in all honesty. 22 years old, the Brazilian. We've had a few teams looking a little bit interested in him. You can see Roma are interested at the moment. I believe AC Milan were interested at one point in him. I don't know if they'll come back in the summer. Last year, Gilvan, he played well for us. He got 22 games, but he only scored 1 goal. And for £8.5 million, that's not the craziest return. But you can see this year he's really stepped up. 11 assists, 20 goals in actually less games than last year. And whilst he's not perhaps translated that goal-scoring form into Europe just yet, at 22 years old, he's still got a little bit of time to develop. And I'm confident that he can really add that to his game. And hopefully come big for us in the big matches. If we just look at his report, you can see important matches is his problem. And that's perhaps really kind of summed up quite nicely in just how good his league form is and how sometimes in Europe he seems to just fizzle out. You can see though he's a consistent performer. He has developed well over the last few months as well, which is really good. And the fans love him, which is kind of always nice to see. Anyway, another goal scorer for us, Fialos. 19 goals for him. I've noticed this year I don't feel like we've scored quite as many goals as we have in previous years across all competitions. But I guess we've got the goals that we've needed. But Fialos here, he's been a good player for us, the left winger, kind of in the shadow of Paul Smith a lot, but when we've called upon him to do a job for us, he has done that, and he's perhaps featured more in the first team than perhaps you'd expect. 12 starts and 9 appearances off the bench in the Primera Division. Obviously, a lot of that kind of just simply comes down to me wanting to keep his morale high by kind of repeatedly playing him. Other players perhaps worth honourable mentions, Andres Mora with 16 goals in all competitions, a fairly good return for the Colombian. Shame he was out towards the end of the year with a thigh strain. Pereira's done okay for us. It feels like our wide midfielders always do well regardless of their ability. This guy has declined a little bit of late. Obviously, he has got a double hernia at the moment. His contract runs out at the end of next year. I might try and cash in on him in the summer. Whether or not we can actually do that, I guess, remains to be seen. Anyway, they're the goal scorers. In terms of assists, Forster actually with 34 assists. A really good return for him out wide. I kind of mentioned earlier that it kind of feels like with our systems, it doesn't really matter who we play out wide. They always seem to perform well. And, Forster is no exception. That said, 34 assists is a really good return for him. 1 goal and 3 assists in Europe as well is nice. I feel like the stats always get a little bit bloated with the Premier Division results, but, you can't take too much away from him. Anyway, Paul Smith also up there out on the left. He has 23 assists, so 29 goals and 23 assists for Paul Smith is a really good return. Delighted with how he's done. Mosca also doing well on the assists. Perhaps not a player you'd expect to be up there, but 19 assists for him. As much as he smashes in 70 goals a season, to get 19 assists, that's a really good return, and it shows that he's kind of not this one-trick pony when it comes to just kind of scoring. His passing and vision aren't the greatest, but I guess it's his ability to find a little bit of space and kind of be a real handful for the defenders and then create space for other players to run into ahead of him while he holds up the play. That really kind of suits him well. Of course, he's got great strength, so he is capable of holding up the ball. Jumping reach isn't the best, but I feel like there's a very easy kind of trap, I guess, to fall into when you have a fast striker who scores lots of goals in FM to kind of pigeonhole them as kind of a bit of a Michael Owen, a player who just kind of scores for fun. They're I said it earlier, he's the fox in the box, whereas Mosca, I feel like that's a little bit unfair on him because, he does do a lot with the ball when he has it. Anyway, other players definitely worth a mention. The fullbacks, Kabasele and Gaiganov. Kabasele playing out on the left-hand side has done really well for us this year. 3 assists in Europe, which is good. 10 in the league, 1 goal, 16 assists in all competitions. Really impressed by the fullback's contribution there. Gaiganov, I mentioned earlier, he kind of joined us this year, and he's only been at the club half a season. But you can see 8 goals for him in 14 games. And he also got 4 assists in cup games and 1 in a continental game. I believe that was, I'm trying to think, was that? I feel like that was the first knockout stage game that he got the assist. So that would have been against... where are we looking? That would have been against Atletico. I feel like he assisted them or a goal. I might be wrong. I feel like that's where he got his assist. But anyway, £26.5 million is always a massive sum of money for a fullback to come into the club and live up to. That is always... It's what's the word? You're almost destined to fail. It's very difficult to live up to that. But from what I've seen so far, very impressed by this guy. He's only 24. He's not the craziest fullback really going forward, but what he does do is defend exceptionally, has good pace, reasonable physicals, and his mentals are kind of out of this world, really, for a player who's only 24. And, you know what? I think playing the attacking fullback, coming in, paying a lot of money for him in terms of his wages, £80,000, there was always going to be some pressure. But I feel like Gaiganov has lived up to that kind of billing so far to really be a marquee signing for us. Anyway, in terms of key passes, let's have a look at this. Who has been doing the passes? Well, you can see here, Gilvan, Bouchard and Mosca. We've already talked about Gilvan and Mosca. We'll take a quick look at Joe Bouchard. 237 key passes for him. You can see 8 assists in the league, 1 assist in Europe. Perhaps a little bit underwhelming by Joe Bouchard standards. I feel like last year he had a really good season. I say underwhelming. If we actually look here, it's an improvement on the last few years. And actually, it's the most amount of assists he's had in 5 years. And he played 24 games for us, which is actually a surprisingly large amount, really. His average rating of 8.48 is, again, really high. It's the highest it's been in a number of years. You look back to the 27-28 season to find a season where he had a kind of just a similar level of average rating. Of course, with the overall league standard kind of stepping up, Joe Bouchard knows for a fact he's not going to get the assists and the goals that he did once. You can see when he first joined us, he really was just a step above everyone else. 20 assists, 17 assists, 19 assists. Crazy stats, but really, we can't really complain about this guy's contribution. 29 years old. He is in his 12th year now with the club, I do believe. Is this his 12th season? That's crazy. He's going into his 12th season. But no, he's doing very well for us. He's getting a little bit better, actually, at his playmaking capabilities, which I find a little bit interesting. If we kind of look at his overall kind of player progression, he has very good physicals, and the fact he has 17 natural fitness gives me a little bit of hope that perhaps he's a player who will have some longevity to him. Despite the fact he's 29, he plays in I want to say an immobile role in the squad in terms of he's often playing kind of deep line playmaker, a Pirlo role, a later Gerrard role perhaps. And I kind of look at his kind of attributes, and I just wonder if, even if he loses a bit of his acceleration and pace, are his mentals going to carry him through? And whilst his mentals, they're not necessarily absolutely crazy, the fact he's got great decisions, great composure, good off the ball and good vision, these attributes I've got highlighted here are attributes which I feel like a deep line playmaker can operate with if he still has these. And I mean, you look at his composure here. His composure started at 11. It's now at 16. That's a fantastic improvement. And you can actually see it's improved a little bit this year as well, which is really nice. And you can see that whilst perhaps some of his technicals, they peaked quite soon and they've improved, fairly early on and then not changed a lot since. I bet if we go through his mentals here, you'll kind of see a progression that's still going on even now. It probably won't be absolutely massive because he's 29 and he's not kind of hit that point, I guess, where his technicals and his physicals are starting to decline super rapidly. But you can certainly see here a trend whereby, yes, he developed very, very well early on. And I should point out that my progression graphs, I've got a weird bug here where it says I'm in the year 2044. where obviously I'm in the year 2033, but it's worth noting I'm pretty sure this graph is fairly accurate. In fact, it looks like it only shows the last 10 years of his development. Either way, really, really weird, but I guess FM doesn't normally expect you to play 10 seasons with one player staying at the club. But no, you can see here, like, he really has developed, and yes, when he was younger, he developed a lot more. I mean, look at that jump in anticipation, 0.6. That's a real standout little jump there, but certainly some of his mentals are continuing to improve, and hopefully they will kind of continue to improve. His decision's up to 19 now. I'm excited to see the longevity that Bouchard has as a career. I feel like players like Paul Smith, if Paul Smith wants to last longer, he's probably got to learn to play down the middle. And of course, we are training him to play as a striker, and yes, he has amazing natural fitness, and his physicals are very good. The worry with a player like Paul Smith is playing out wide. What happens when that pace starts to leave him? What happens when his legs do start to go? Do you play him in the winger position still, despite his lack of pace? And can he kind of step up to the plate and maintain the level of performance you've expected from him when he was in his prime? I feel like wingers, they have this faster burnout period once they start to decline as players. It's kind of a thing in real football as well. You kind of look at the outfield positions. It's very typical, I want to say, for a wide man to kind of go more down the middle or play, a less mobile role in the team. I think kind of a good example of that would be what I expect to see from Ronaldo in the next few years for Real Madrid. He's the kind of player I could see play for another 5 or 6 years, but he probably will just play as an out-and-out striker rather than being the younger Ronaldo, should we say, the one that was, in his early days at Real Madrid, his early days at United, kind of out wide, just terrorising defences with his flair and pace. And well, that's going to be a task for Paul Smith to overcome. I do believe, I want to say this, yeah, we're still training him to play striker. I think we might train him to play centre attacking mid as well, Paul Smith. But that's a story for another time. It's a shame, really, that his passing isn't great, because that would really enable me to just play him as a centre mid in the playmaker role. But as I said, unfortunately, not to be. In terms of other key passes, Andres Mora has made a pretty good contribution this year. He's not played a ton of games for us, and he's been out towards the end of the year with a thigh strain. But that said, he's a good player for us, and he's kind of stuck with the club for a long time now. It's a shame that his contract runs out kind of at the end of next year. I'm hoping he'll want to extend it. I wanted to offer him a new contract earlier, and you can see he's just unhappy, which is a real shame. It's worth noting that whilst he has still got Colombian nationality, he is eligible to play for Gibraltar and has been for about a year. Now, normally if a player wants to play for Gibraltar, they will pretty much declare their allegiance to the nation as soon as they qualify. And given how good he is, and given some of the news items I've seen, I find it very unlikely that he'll play for Gibraltar. I'm pretty certain that he will end up playing for Colombia, this guy, but he's been a good player for us. Anyway, we've talked about key passes. Let's have a look at the mistakes. Who are the men to blame? Well, Bouchard, Kabasele, Mustafa. That's a high amount of mistakes. That's something that we might have to look at. Is there a way that we can, remedy that? I feel like it's very easy when you play FM just to fall into this kind of trap of just not really changing a lot. Whereas playing Mustafa at centre-back, he's always going to make a few mistakes just because his composure, whilst it's okay, isn't great, and his passing's fairly poor. And playing him as a limited defender makes him more likely to just boot it up. And with Mosca, he's okay in the air, but you can't expect him to win a lot. And so it might be worth next year perhaps looking to, see if we can get Ramadan Mustafa playing a slightly simpler game, trying to do less flamboyant passes, for example. So that's something there. Kabasele out wide, that's a little bit kind of of something perhaps to keep an eye out on, although 58 mistakes in, 3,500 minutes of football really isn't that bad. Bouchard is always going to make mistakes because he's the deep line playmaker playing a lot of ambitious passes going forward. I'm guessing, just by the fact that Gaiganov is also fairly high on the mistakes, that is probably to do with crosses not being completed. And actually, you can see here, the crosses completed percentages for these two players is 21%. So that is more than likely, I guess, where we're seeing those mistakes being made. In terms of most minutes on the pitch, Young is up there. Of course he is. This guy, I love him. 29 years old. I say it every time I see him, but people wanted me to get rid of this guy, and I've stuck with him. He's been superb for us. I mean, obviously, he's always going to have high average ratings and a lot of clean sheets every year. I mean, I kind of find it funny when you've got a player who's got 23 assists in 23 clean sheets in 27 games, 24 clean sheets in 26. But this guy, he's developed at the club. We can trigger a contract extension clause. Let's do that. 3 more years of Ludwig Young. You can see his deal will, I guess, run out now in 5 years' time, which is really good. This guy, though, 45 caps for Sweden. He has now become Sweden's number 1 and has been for a few years. I don't feel like he made quite so many memorable performances this year as he has in years gone by, but when you look back to games like the Barcelona game, he certainly made a big contribution. And he's getting on a little bit now, 29 years old. I feel like that's snuck up quickly. Of course, with players like Bouchard and Smith, kind of in their late 30s now, they've got kind of limited years on them. With Young, I mean, he's a goalkeeper. He's 29. He could have another 10 years if he wanted to. So hopefully we can keep hold of him for the next few years at least. In terms of tackles completed, Ludwig Young made 2 key tackles and got 100% tackles. So well done to you. Mustafa and Frigier right up there. That's really impressive. Mustafa, 92% tackles won. I guess the logical thing talking about Mustafa is to look at headers won, because he always wins headers. He's got 131 key headers, 90% kind of aerial duel winning ratio. Is that what we'll call it, that? But no, he's done great for us. Unfortunately, we've been... I don't say we've been unlucky, I guess, with McMaster, but McMaster, you can see that's 74% header completion. Frigier, I think a few years ago, was topping the high 80%. So, again, that perhaps reinforces the idea that McMaster hasn't quite been the player I wanted him to be. I knew he was never going to be good in the air. I just wonder if there's better rounded better rounded centre-backs out there who have the pace that he has, the athleticism he has that complements Mustafa, but are also good enough in the air. That might be something we look at, might be something that we have to address in the the next few years, really. I feel like we can't change too much too quickly. And to cut him, really, would be extremely harsh, because he has played well for us. Anyway, in terms of player of the matches, Mosca was 16, Paul Smith with 7, Gilvan with 5. Obviously, a lot of them coming in the league, but impressive nevertheless. In terms of average ratings this year, Mosca topping it, then Gilvan with 8.25. Bouchard, Camilo Castano, not a player I've talked about a ton, really. He hasn't played a lot. This guy, 20 years old Colombian, he kind of came into the side, and I was really excited about this guy as a prospect, and he's just not really lived up to that billing, which is a shame. He could improve a lot in the future, and I kind of brought him in to be this hot prospect, and, well, simply put, he's just not developed, and it's not without a lack of game time, really. I've tried to play him. He's played okay in the games we've played him in, but I don't know, he's not shown me signs of development, and, well, we didn't pay a massive fee for him. We paid less than £1 million, but nevertheless, I don't know, when you sign a young centre-back, you want to see immediate promise, and he's a player who, if the right bid comes in, I might try and sell Young, whilst perhaps other teams are still looking to invest in his potential, because I don't see him becoming a first-team centre-back for us, unfortunately, which was kind of what he was brought in to develop into. Anyway, in terms of other things, we've kind of gone through a lot of these kind of more common stats. Interceptions, we'll have a quick look at this. Mustafa, 461. McMaster, 307. Cabracelle doing well as well, as is Geigenov, and Bouchard actually putting in a little bit of a shift there. The last stat we will look at real quick, I think we'll go with assists per 90 minutes. You can see Forster more than an assist a game, which isn't too bad. Fireloss doing well, Paul Smith doing well as well, Geigenov up there. In terms of minutes per goal, how often is Mosca scoring? He is scoring a goal every 52 minutes. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I'm kind of curious, actually, on these goals per minute, I assume that's what this is, average minutes per goals, why would you display the minutes as a decimal? Would it not make more sense to do the actual number of seconds? Am I missing? Someone let me know. I'm not really a statistics person. That seems like a really weird way to break it down. Because surely you'd be better just doing the minute, rather than saying 15.6 or 90.68 minutes, surely you'd be better saying something like 90 minutes and 42 seconds. I don't know if 42 is 68% of 60, but the point there is that it doesn't make sense to me, really. But anyway, that's a little gripe. If there's a developer watching, which I don't know if there is anyone from SI watching, I like to think there is. Please fix. Anyway, that's the team. That's kind of what's gone on this year. In terms of players to keep an eye out on, because I do feel like we have got a few little prospects who deserve, a little bit of a light shining on them. Perhaps Salcedo in goal, I think, has real potential. He has shown a lot of promise this year, the Mexican. 20 years old, time to develop. As I said, he's already improved a lot. He's 20. Goalkeepers, they can continue to develop for some years. I think we've got young tutoring him at the moment. We have. So I'm hoping that's going to help him a little bit. As I said, maybe we can get a third goalkeeper in who could be a really good tutor for Salcedo. That might be something to look into. As I said, I'm looking for really that third goalkeeper. Someone who's a little bit more experienced, perhaps, who we can use for tutoring, for development. So, that might be an option there, I guess. If we look at the younger players, I've talked about Castano, just a player who's not really stepped up. In terms of the first team, obviously, it's still a very, very young squad with the exception of a few players. If we look at our reserves, we have got some okay prospects here. We brought in this guy, Mark Caranzi, I think in January, I want to say. He joined us from the Earthquakes Academy. He was a player who my North American scout was ranting and raving about. And he looks like a good winger, to be fair. He's got okay mentals, I guess. They're a little bit disappointing in some areas. Physicals are absolutely insane. It's really going to be all about, can he develop technically? Can he get that attacking prowess that we need him to have? Obviously, the technical stats are the easiest to improve. But at 18, he's not got a lot of years to develop. But you can see here, he's quite hotly tipped. Mohamed Sarr is a player who will be leaving us this year. I actually brought him in only last year for 2K. Not played a lot for us, not developed a lot. He wants to move on. It's fair enough, really. Jason Mesa, a Colombian player who's been out on loan here at Leganés. He's an okay player, this guy. He's a player who I might look to loan out. I'd like to loan him out to a Gibraltar club, I think, if someone wanted him. I feel like Gibraltar Lions wanted him at the start of this year, but they wanted him as a backup. So, I don't know. If a similar offer to that came in, he might be a player I look to move on. I guess one more player we'll have a quick look at is Powell, who is leaving us. Not leaving us. He's on loan from us. A player who I kind of want to get rid of him. 22 years old. He's got some potential still. He's had an okay season, 9 goals in 29 games. But I don't know. I feel like he's never going to get into the first team. Try and cash in on him while we can. One player I've not talked a lot about, and I'll just quickly talk about him, is this guy, Daniel Mitchell. He's 18 years old, Gibraltarian. Produced at our academy. He's a good player, but he's never going to be a goalkeeper for us. So again, a player who, I don't know, we might try and move on. If a Gibraltar club came in for him, I'd have to seriously consider moving him on, just for the benefit of that Gibraltar club, or Gibraltarian club, but also for the development of this guy as a goalkeeper who could potentially become, Gibraltar's goalkeeper in the next few years. Anyway, that's the bulk of the team. There's a few more players we'll quickly go over. Jason Hall out on loan this year, of course, a bit of a long-term player at the club. 25 years old, Gibraltarian nationality, of course. You can see he had an okay loan spell, but he's a player who's kind of been a casualty, I guess, the development and the investment that we've put into the defensive areas of the team. He's just not good enough, sadly enough. And at 25, I'd like to keep him at the club, but a loan might happen again next year. Hernan Sanchez is leaving us at the end of the year for Gibraltar Lions. Looking forward to seeing what the Ecuadorian can perhaps do. Good to see Gibraltar Lions picking up a few of our players. I'm hoping that a few players in our team here might get some offers from Gibraltarian clubs. Throughout this save, particularly over the last few years, I've had a lot of comments saying, Jack, why don't you sell all your reserve players that you don't use to other Gibraltarian clubs or Gibraltarian clubs? And the reason is, the players don't want to go to the other Gibraltarian clubs because they see them as such a massive step down. I'm hoping that with the money coming in, that might be a hurdle that the team starts to overcome, and it will definitely help the teams improve. And who knows, maybe they can prove some points and pick up some players and hopefully strengthen their sides. One more player I'll talk about really, really quickly. Bulat, the Croat here, a very good player. Croatian, not played internationally. I'm kind of hoping that he might pick up Gibraltarian nationality. I feel like I made the mistake. In fact, no, I didn't. For some reason, I thought I'd made the mistake, and I've made it a few times. I'll hold my hands up and say it's a mistake, of loaning out players whilst they're playing for us, and that obviously breaks the number of consecutive days and years they've been playing in Gibraltar. This guy, I don't know, he might be able to pick up Gibraltarian nationality. I think he's only a year away. So keep an eye out on him. I guess a player I'd like to keep hold of, just for that one more year, if possible. But no, that's kind of the team. There aren't a ton of hot young prospects at the moment. I feel like earlier on, in this save over the, you look back 9 years ago, we were looking to buy in a lot of young players and develop them because that was kind of what we had to do. There was this necessity where we couldn't buy players who were good enough for our first team. We had to buy younger, develop them, and then potentially move on a few. You look at the likes of Christian Mendes, Walter Del Sol, to name a few. I kind of feel like we're now in a situation where, with the money that we have, where we can just, invest it where we want to. You can see our wage budget is really, really hefty. I can, of course, adjust that if I want to. Realistically, the wages this year might rise a little bit. I'm interested to know if the TV deal is going to get any bigger. I believe it probably will as the league continues to rise in rep. In terms of the wage budget, I don't think I really want to exceed kind of 750k if I can avoid it. I mean, you look at the club balance, we're looking very, very good. £89 million in the bank, £68 million profit for this year, an extra £200,000 a month on wages or sorry, a week on wages isn't going to hurt us too badly. Even if we were to go for an extra £250,000, we're talking £12 million less profit for the season. I can live with that. I can definitely live with that. So I don't know what we're going to do. You'll notice here there are a few more players who I've got coming in. Of course, we will talk more about them soon. And there's also Mini Mosca, who will be joining us. There's your exclusive. If you've watched until the end, you'll notice I haven't set a nickname. I can't set a nickname. His name is actually Mosca. So we're going to have Graphite or Graffite and Graffite and Mosca and Mosca. I mean, our players are actually multiplying. Anyway, that's your exclusive if you watched until this point. Of course, if you have watched until this point, thank you very much for watching. I do greatly appreciate your viewership, guys. If you've got any comments with regards to the players, these end-of-season reviews, how you might like me to change things going forward, feel free to let me know. I think in the next end-of-season review, we'll have a little bit more of a look at the league and the stats and all that jazz. As I said, next year could be a really interesting one, depending on how Gibraltarian teams invest their money. Hopefully, they do it wisely. So yeah, that is all from me. Thank you for watching. I believe next season, I want to say it's season 19, which seems absolutely mad to say. I'm looking forward to it, though. It should be a good one. And yeah, that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching, guys. It is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.